Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our 10th webinar of the Entrepreneur Bootcamp webinar series. We're so excited to have you here today. Our topic will be LinkedIn Harness the Power and will be facilitated by Kent Hamilton. I would also like to introduce myself and our team. My name is Sadia, and I will be the monitor for today's webinar. And we also have our translator, Rocio, and our technical support person, Sacha. During this webinar, you will have the opportunity to ask questions. You will be able to do so using the Q&A button that will show up on the bottom of your screen. This webinar is provided under a grant from the Texas Workforce Commission, Workforce Solutions Rural Capital Area, and the Service Learning Excellence Program at Texas State University. Kent, thank you so much for joining us and being a part of the series, and I will hand this over to you now.
Well, thank you. I am just so happy, like I said, to be back. And this is such a relevant topic, like we talked about, especially in the environment that we're living in today. So we're going to have a great time today learning about LinkedIn. And so what I thought about for today's webinar, we will take some time and we're going to talk about the importance of LinkedIn. And then over the years of teaching this course, some helpful tips and things that I share with my students on how to improve your LinkedIn account. And then at the end, we'll certainly have time for some questions. And if time permits, we'll actually look at a couple of LinkedIn accounts and talk about them and what we think might be available to be improved, what's really good, and then show you some of the areas where you can edit and improve your LinkedIn account. So let's get started. So I think that we owe it to ourselves to invest in our personal brand. So notice that I use the word invest because this is going to take some time. I will not lie to you, but the end result is going to be well worth it, and you are going to be so pleased with your profile. It is important to note, however, that your LinkedIn profile is not the same as your resume. It's certainly going to have some of those same elements in it, but they're two very different documents. Your LinkedIn profile encompasses so much more than your resume. So why is it all that important to have a really complete LinkedIn profile? The reason is simply this. It is estimated that people with complete profiles are 40% more likely to receive job offers via LinkedIn. That's a lot, 40% more likely. Significant enough that we should spend the time to make a really excellent LinkedIn profile. So let's get to it and let's build your brand. You know, there are some people that are professionals at building brands. They invest a considerable amount of time and resources to achieve successful brands. Some are even formally trained as marketers to build those brands. So I ask, why wouldn't we invest this same amount of time and resources in ourselves? I know from my own personal experience, I should spend some more time on my LinkedIn account. But over the last few years of teaching the business communications course, and as we have assigned students the task of building their own LinkedIn profile, it has brought my profile to the forefront for me. And slowly over time, I continue to make improvements. And that's what I want you to do as well. It is extremely easy to let things get in the way or to take priority over working on our brand. So today I want to challenge you. I challenge you to carve out time out of every week to work on your profile. I know for me, if I just sat down and I would try to do a profile start to finish all at once, it would be a little overwhelming. So try this. See if you can just set aside 30 minutes every week to work on it. Then, once you feel that you have it the way that you want it, set aside 30 minutes a month so you can maintain and upgrade your LinkedIn profile. Now, that doesn't mean that you should only spend those 30 minutes a month on the LinkedIn platform. That should be done almost daily, but we'll get to that much later in the presentation. Also, Don't let yourself feel selfish or egotistical, anything like that about investing in yourself. You are worth it, and your business is worth it. Your LinkedIn profile page is actually designed to be your very own personal marketing platform. It is the very foundation of your personal brand. So if you already have a LinkedIn profile, good for you. You're way ahead of the game. You can use the information that we're going to talk about to review your profile and to make improvements. But if you don't have one, that's just fine too. Think of it this way. Just use it as an empty canvas where you get to paint whatever you want. So like I said, over the years of teaching this course and encouraging my students to build a LinkedIn profile, I've developed some helpful tips and ideas to build the very best profile that you can. So let's get started with that. So the first thing that I want to talk about is your profile picture. And I'm going to tell you, if you take nothing else away from today in this webinar, other than the profile picture, that is excellent. It is one of the most important elements in your profile. You must choose the profile picture that is correct for LinkedIn. If you don't have the proper photo, you may have already lost your viewers and possibly even lost credibility, and we don't want that to happen. It's also important to note that you don't have to get a professional photographer to take your picture. Sometimes you can just use what you have. You may have a great photo of yourself that you used for another purpose. That's just fine. If you don't have a photo, use your phone to take it. I think it's best, however, if you have a friend or roommate, spouse, anyone like that to take the photo, so you're not so much concerned with the whole selfie thing, because really this photo is just too important. This photo is like a calling card. People are going to make first impressions about you based on this photo. So there's lots of tips out there about what your picture should look like and all of those kinds of things. So let's think about it. Your face should actually take up about 60% of that photo. And a lot of people ask, well, what should I wear in my photo? Just use this tip. Wear what you would wear to work. So if you would normally wear a business suit into the office every day, then by all means, wear a business suit. On the other hand, if you owned a restaurant or maybe a landscape business or something similar, you might have a polo shirt on that has your company logo, and that would work just fine. If you're a student or perhaps you're currently in the job market, I would recommend that you dress for the position that you want to get. I also want you to pay particular attention to the background of your profile photo. You don't want it to be too busy. You don't want too much going on in the background to take away from you. So a plain or a neutral background is always going to be a great choice. And lastly, don't forget to smile and to try to look inviting, like the young lady on the right-hand side of the slide that we're looking at. Now, your profile photo isn't the only photo that you can have up in the heading section of your profile. You can also add a background photo. I was so shocked to learn this, I had no clue it was even possible until I started teaching this class. So your profile photo is going to show up in the round frame to the left, the one that you see on the top of the slide. If you don't have a background photo, LinkedIn is going to have one for you, and it's that standard blue colored background with different points that are connected. It kind of reminds me of a constellation, and it's sort of interesting, but it's not going to make your profile stand out. This is an important visual element of your profile, so take advantage of it. I caution you, however, don't just pick up a picture that you think is pretty. Find one that helps to build your brand. Find one that helps tell your story. So for example, let's say you're a realtor. You might have a background photo that includes you and some of your clients standing in front of a sold sign at a home, and you're handing over the new keys. Or perhaps if we go back to our landscaping business, you might have a before and after photo of a property that you worked on to show the improvements that you made. This is going to help to draw in your reader and provide a more memorable profile, and that's what we want. But here's a word of caution. If you use the internet to search for a photo, be careful not to use a photo in your profile that is copyrighted. So you can see in the bottom of our slide, it looks like a ticker for stocks or something like that. If you were a financial analyst, that would be a much more interesting background photo than the one that comes from LinkedIn. But let's look at a couple of other examples before we move on. So what are our examples? Here's a great photo. This is Dr. Menefee's profile. So one of the things that we notice right away is that it's the standard blue background from LinkedIn. So she could definitely change that and perhaps make her profile a little more interesting. As far as the profile photo goes, it's a wonderful photo, but I would always tell you that my recommendation would be your profile photo needs to be just you. It doesn't need to have anyone else in the photo with you. But probably with a little cropping, she could change that photo out and just include herself. So let's look at another example that we have of these photos. So Roger was a student in my class a few semesters ago, and I think he did a really excellent job of this section of his profile. So what Roger is wearing is completely perfect for his profile photograph. He is a photographer, so that is normally what he would wear to work. But I really like what he did with his background photo. So it shows some business charts and things like that in there that looks like a computer, but there's that camera that's up in the upper right-hand corner. So immediately when you see that, you might think that Roger is a photographer or even has a great interest in photography. So that's a really good example of how you can use that section of your profile. So now that we've seen a couple of examples of what this looks like, you may be wondering, how do you change those photos? How do you do that? So let's take a look at how you change those photos. So this is my profile. And if you see on the background photograph, there's a round button and it looks almost like a pencil. So that's your edit tool. Whenever you are in your profile and you're in the edit mode, if you see that little icon, you can click on it and immediately that allows you to edit that particular section. So if I wanted to go in and change my background photo, I could click on that and upload a new photo. I could also look at how I position the photo that is currently there if I wanted to change it. Now let's move on to our next topic. So one of the things that I highly recommend is to create a personalized URL for your LinkedIn profile. Why would we want that? Well, sometimes we might want to promote our LinkedIn profile on something like a business card, or you might even want to put it on your resume. That might be a good idea. So you want something that's memorable and it's something that people can easily understand. If you don't personalize your URL, LinkedIn will do one for you, but it's much longer and it has numbers and things associated with it. It's a little more cumbersome. So it's too easy to change it to a personalized URL. So let's think about doing that when you're working on your LinkedIn profile. So how do you do it? Well, here are the steps. Very, very easy. When you go to your profile, you would want to click on the Me icon at the top of your LinkedIn homepage. Then you click View Profile. Click the Edit Public Profile and URL in the right rail. Under Edit your custom URL in the right rail, click the Edit icon, which is that little pencil, next to your public profile URL. Then you can type in your new custom URL in the text box and then simply click Save. Pretty easy. But let me show you where you find those places on your profile. Let's take a look. So if you look on the top photograph, you can see on the upper right-hand side, Edit Public Profile and URL. You would click right there on that link. That will take you to what we see at the bottom. You simply click on Edit Customize URL, that little pencil, and you'll be able to change anything that you want to customize your URL. So that's how you do that. So let's stop for just a second and say, congratulations. Once you've gotten this much done, you are almost completely finished with the top part of your profile. So good job so far. But let's move on. We're almost there. So what are we going to talk about next? It's your headline. I think a lot of people think that whatever title you may currently have must be your headline. And you certainly could use your current title if you wanted to, but there's no hard and fast rule that you have to use it in your headline. So by now we've gotten some photographs and we've done some other things. Maybe your creativity has kicked in. So think outside the box. Give your readers an additional glimpse into who you are and how you envision your role in business. Think of it this way. What makes you, you? And what sets you apart from all the rest? And not that you would copy anything that someone else has done on their profile, but if you need some inspiration, just look at those other profiles. It may spark something in your own mind to use on your own profile. So as we start to get into more of the written sections of your profile, I want to encourage you to always project a very warm and welcoming feeling. As I tell my students, you must know your audience. So if you wrote your summary in the third person, what impression would that make on your audience? I would tell you that it probably wouldn't be a very good one. While you certainly can use the third person on your resume, it is perfectly acceptable to use first person on LinkedIn. You really want your reader and your audience to get a good sense of who you are and learn a little bit from your brand. Let yourself shine through. Here's another thought. If you might be seeking a job, and sometimes even entrepreneurs do that, search for job descriptions of postings that are similar to the one you want. Indeed.com is a great source for job profiles and for listings. That's going to help you identify some keywords. What you can do is to take those job postings and put them in a tool like Wordle. And that's going to cluster these words together that all of these recruiters are looking for. Then you want to make sure to use those words in your profile. I just want to stop for a moment and let you know that I may mention a few different websites in this webinar, but don't worry about having to write them down right now. On our last slide, all of those links are going to be there. So let's talk a little bit more about your summary. So what is a summary? So the summary is actually your story. Please do not leave this section blank. It's very important. This is a section where you're going to bring yourself to life through words. It's not just a listing of your past job positions. You'll get to do that later, so there's no need to recreate it here. And it's okay to let a little bit of your personality show through. You can talk about skills and accomplishments and how that can impact others. So many people ask me, how long should this part be? Well, I would say probably 3 to 5 very short paragraphs would be good. You might also want to have some bullet points in there if that seems appropriate for your particular summary. If you have some outstanding results, maybe from current or previous positions, you could certainly share those here. And don't be afraid to use some numbers to illustrate your accomplishments. But at the same time, let's don't overdo it with the stats in this section. However, a few of those stats here and there are certainly captivating to your reader. But this is where I'm going to tell you that you're going to need to invest some time. Draft your summary, revise it, edit it, let other people look at it and read it and give you feedback. You're going to have to probably try a few drafts, run your summary past multiple people and get their feedback. I once had a student that had an exceptional summary section. It stood out so much to me that I still remember it. And that is exactly what you want your readers to do. Remember you. She started off by sharing her love of international travel and experiencing different cultures. And then she explained why this passion of hers led her to want a career in international business. It was just the perfect pairing. Just remember, this is a process and it may take some time to craft your perfect summary, and that's perfectly okay. So let's take a look at an example of a summary section. This is from a student a couple of semesters ago. So you can take a moment and just sort of read through it. But what I really did like about this particular summary section is that she took the first couple of paragraphs and really gave us a glimpse of her and her personality and her interest. I love the fact that she talked about selling raffle tickets and selling Girl Scout cookies. I think that speaks volumes about who she is. But then you also know that she did take advantage of using those bullet points to summarize her qualifications. So she certainly has her professional qualifications listed right there in a very easy to read format for her readers. It's a great example, don't you agree? So next, let's talk about buzzwords. Okay, what are buzzwords and do we want them? No, we do not want buzzwords. So every January, LinkedIn will release a ranking of their top 10 most overused buzzwords in LinkedIn profiles. So let's think about that. What does that mean? Well, just like they sound, these are words that are overused on LinkedIn. They're overused so much that they start to become meaningless because we just see them way too much. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't use them, but you really must go beyond those words to demonstrate your abilities and skills and make your profile memorable. So annually, perhaps in January, look up those buzzwords on LinkedIn and go through your profile. See if you can update it and remove some of them if they are actually in your profile. I actually found some. Let's take a look at them along with some alternative words that we might use to switch them out. But before we do that, you might be wondering, how do you come up with a different word? Well, your friend here is a website called www.thesaurus.com. You simply go to that website, you can type in the word you want to replace, and you will get a listing of words that have a very similar meaning. You just have to be very careful to pick out the ones that it's best for how you are using it in your particular profile. So let's look at some of these examples. So for passionate, that's a word that people might use a lot. We could say ardent, if that is correct in the way you are using it. Expert could be adept. Creative could be innovative. Skilled could be proficient. Focused might be concentrated. or experienced might be seasoned. So I know that we've said this earlier in the webinar, but I want to pause here for just a moment to give you another reminder. Our goal today is to give you tools to develop a strong LinkedIn profile or to improve the one that you have. Once you accomplish that, though, the work doesn't end. Remember, we talked about needing to dedicate time to constantly refresh and update your LinkedIn profile. So now with that reminder behind us, let's take a look at the experience section. So the experience section really is going to be the one that most closely resembles your resume. You're going to want to build on that summary section and provide more detailed information in this experience section. I get asked all the time by my students, well, what if I don't have any experience? Well, I think that you do. Have you volunteered anywhere? Were you a member of a club or a group where you helped out with something? Have you taken on a leadership role in a group project? Just sit down and really think about all those types of things. It is valuable experience, even if it wasn't paid experience. So if you've been employed or perhaps owned your business for a while, people still would like to know that you have done other things. So there's an entire section where you can include volunteer work. It's just another fantastic way to showcase your readers who you are. In your experience section, just like your resume, you're going to work with your most current position on top and then work your way backward. On each position, you can reinforce and expand upon what you mentioned in your summary. Remember, this is your time to shine, and a list of just weekly assignments or duties isn't going to get you there. So what can you do differently? I want you to focus on achievements. Now, that doesn't mean that every single bullet point has to be an achievement, but try to get as many as you can in there. How do you do that, though? Well, first, we need to know the difference between a job duty and an accomplishment. Plain and simple, a duty describes what you did, and an accomplishment describes how well you did it. For example, if you say that you planned events, that would probably be considered a job duty. Whereas if you said you raised $100,000 by selling out tickets to a 200-person charity event, that is certainly an accomplishment. This helps to paint a better picture of you and gives your reader something that maybe they're not expecting. So now that we understand the difference between a duty and an accomplishment, how do we make that change? Let's take a look at some great questions that will help us get there. So one LinkedIn author had this incredible list of questions just to get you thinking. So I challenge you to do this. Go through each of your positions and consider these questions. Now, while you're doing it, make sure you have some way to take notes. If you like to jot down notes with pen and paper, then certainly do that. If you would prefer to jot down your notes on your computer or tablet or even on your phone, do that. Whatever works for you is what you should do. So let's think about some of these questions, like, what did I do that was above and beyond my normal job duties? How did I stand out among other employees? Perhaps you won an award or you got accolades for doing something. What new process did I implement that might have improved something here in the company? Did you solve a problem? Did you ever consistently meet or exceed a goal or a quota? Did you save money for the company? Or what made me great at my job? So accomplishments are really highlighted with numbers. So think about things where you can use numbers. Stats will speak volumes here. Specific facts will do the job as well. So what do we mean? So think about how many people were impacted by your work. What percentage did you exceed those goals? Instead of just saying that you managed a budget, list how much money you managed and how much money you saved. This is going to make it much easier for your reader to understand and appreciate your level of accomplishment. Then I would say take it one step further and add in what was the benefit to your boss or company. If you do this, you will clearly communicate not only what you're capable of doing, but also the direct benefit the employer will receive if he or she hires you. So let's say you have created 20 client reports each month, and you put that down on your list. Instead of just using that, write something like you created and prepared 20 weekly and monthly status reports to ensure clients consistently received timely and complete information. So reading that, a hiring manager will automatically see that if she hires you, you'll be able to develop ways to provide great service to their clients. When you include that benefit, you more effectively sell the tangible things you can bring to that company. For some people, me included, this may be difficult because sometimes we might feel like we're bragging on ourselves. But people tell me, and I tell my students, don't think like that. This is where you want to stand out. And here is a section where you can certainly do that. So one last thing about this section. Let's say you are a student and you don't have a job yet. It is still really important for you to have a current job on your profile because many recruiters are looking at that particular section. Here's a workaround that you can use. If this is relevant to you, just create a dummy job listing in the current job section. You can include job titles that you are targeting. So for example, you might put something like full-time student / financial analyst in training. That could be the job title. And then in the company name box, you could do something like maybe in transition or seeking new opportunities. So now let's turn our attention to something fun in our profile, which is making our profile interactive. So your profile should be interactive. So what we've talked about so far is a couple of different photographs and a lot of text. That's not very interactive. So if you have other things, maybe some other marketing collateral, here is where you can put that to use. This is going to bring such a unique dimension to your profile. So what am I talking about here? For your company, or maybe companies where you have worked, you could include the website address for that particular section. If you volunteered someplace and perhaps that nonprofit or organization has a short video about the good work that they do, you could provide a link to that video. Maybe you've done a presentation and you just really felt good about that presentation and thought that it was excellent showcase of your abilities. You could include that slide deck with your profile. You could also add some additional photos if that would work and they're relevant. Certainly add some more photographs. Maybe you even wrote something like a short article or a white paper. You could include that in your profile. Some people are really good at being a blogger. You could create a link to your blog post and could put that in your LinkedIn. Here's why. If we have worked so hard to get our LinkedIn profiles in such great shape, then we want people to spend some time on our profiles. And having these media links and documents and videos and all those types of things will certainly help you accomplish that. And it also helps to demonstrate your passions and your commitments. This is really simple to do. When you click the icon to edit the various sections of your profile, you simply click on the box symbol, and then you can add those photos, videos, blogs, and more. So let's take a look at how this looks on some profiles. Let's look at an example. So this is Roger's LinkedIn profile. Remember, I told you Roger was a student and he was also a photographer. So he included a few photographs of some of the things that he did at Texas State University. So actually, if you clicked on these, that was more than one photograph. It was a few photographs from a football game, and it was a few photographs from the new Ingram Hall, which is the School of Engineering at Texas State. So what a wonderful way to showcase his talents, and people could get an idea for the quality of his work as well. And we have another example to look at. So this is from Roger as well. So this is in his experience section, and he was a student assistant at the Whitliff Collections, which is at Texas State University. And there is a link to a video about the Whitliff Collections. So if you clicked on that, you would be able to see that video and understand a little bit more about what the Whitliff Collections is. And we have one last example of this. This was another student that I had, and she was amazing, and she did these two presentations, and they were so very well done that she put both of these presentation slide decks in her LinkedIn profile. I really think it was a smart thing to do. So we've talked about blogs, and we've talked about white papers and articles and things like that. But let's take just a moment to review a broader category called publications. So publications, you want to make sure that you get credit for your thought leadership. So again, we talked about the white papers, the blog posts. You may have even authored or co-authored an ebook. You can use something called a publications section. It's one of the most underused elements on LinkedIn profiles. And if you use it, that means you can really stand out from the rest of the crowd. It can help to draw attention to your profile, and that's really what we want. So the publications section is a great way for you to highlight these assets that you have. So now we're getting very close to having a well-rounded profile. Let's take a look at one other section called interests. So our interest section is down at the bottom of our profile. And while it's down there at the bottom, we certainly do not want to neglect it. We want to make sure that we are following organizations that are relevant to us and to our work or desired work. We're going to talk about why this is so important a little bit later on. But before we leave this, let's see what the interest section looks like on someone's profile. So here's a great example. So this was a former student who just recently graduated, but is working in an oil-related business. So it would make perfect sense that he's following his alma mater, he's following the Honor Society for Business, and he's following an oil company. Perfect things for him to be following. One thing that I do want to point out though, if you see the small blue see all words down at the bottom of that, if you clicked on that, it is actually a link. And if this particular person were following more than these 6 organizations, all of the different things that he would be following, you could see them. So look for those things in your LinkedIn profile if you want to see all or see more. So now we've covered the main parts of our profile. What's next? What do we need to do? Well, I'll tell you, after we get all of these components finished, now it's time to move on. It's time to grow our network. So how are we going to grow our network? Well, if you're new to LinkedIn, you can try to connect your profile with your address book, but don't worry, you're only going to send LinkedIn connection requests to those that you approve. So you are going to have complete control over who receives them. You can manage this process. But I will tell you, it's probably one of the easiest and most relevant ways to grow your network, especially, like I said, if you are new to LinkedIn. What this will do is it will enable LinkedIn to then suggest people that you could connect with. It is amazing at how effective this could be at identifying relevant people for you to reach out to. So once you've done that, and once you've built your base, I want you to make it a point to actively connect with people who you would like to have in your network. So let's think, maybe you attended a webinar like this, and that speaker really resonated with you. That might be a good connection for you. Perhaps you met somebody at a conference that's in the same industry. Well, would that person be a good connection for you? Maybe so. But again, you don't have to go overboard here and think that the person with the most connections wins. But I would say that in order to get started, you probably would need somewhere between 50 to 100 connections. But just like everything else with your LinkedIn profile, it is very important for those connections to be strategic. And I also want you to know that it is okay to not accept an invitation, especially if it's from someone you don't even know. If I don't immediately recognize a person when I get an invitation, I take a moment and look at that person's profile before I would ever agree to accept that invitation. But most importantly, I want you to get into the habit of following up meetings and conversations with LinkedIn connection requests, because that's what's going to keep your network vibrant and up to date. So once that connection is complete, you'll want to use that messaging feature on LinkedIn to write that person a personal note. So how can we use another section of your profile to highlight your skills? Well, I'll tell you, let's talk about the endorsements section. So you have to have that network built in order to start fleshing out the endorsements section. So endorsements are from other members, and they substantiate and reinforce your skills. And this will also increase your credibility. But what is an endorsement? So LinkedIn has multiple skill lists for a very wide range of positions where members in your network can identify and confirm that you possess that particular skill. Some are very, very specific to certain job types, and others are a little more general in nature. So how do you get endorsed on LinkedIn? So for starters, go through your network and identify connections who you feel genuinely deserve an endorsement from you. That will often be the trigger for people to return the favor and give you an endorsement. And it's very simple. It's just the click of a button. Also, don't be afraid to reach out with a polite message to some of your connections and ask for a few endorsements on some of your key skills. You can do that. And what is really important to remember is that you can edit this section. Remember, what we've talked about over and over is relevance matters. Reach out to people whose endorsement you would value. And once those endorsements start to come in, you might find that there are some that sort of skew the emphasis of your LinkedIn profile in a way that you don't really like, or it doesn't really reflect who you are. That's where you can go in and edit and manage your endorsements. It's simple. Use the edit features in the skills section, and you can choose which ones to show, which ones to hide. You can even change the order in which they're seen. So before we move on, let's just take a look at someone's endorsement section and see what that looks like. So you can see here, this was a former student again. And the endorsements that show up at the top here are those very broad categories that we talked about, because those are the ones where he has the most endorsements. But I would say that they're very important endorsements. So intellectually curious, time management, and leadership, those are all great things. But see that bottom in the middle that says show more? If you clicked on that, you would see the many, many endorsements that this particular person has. That's the ones that show are not all of them. So that's important, again, to click on that button. So while endorsements are great and they're very, very simple and quick to do, what else can we hope for on our profile? It's a recommendation. So a recommendation takes an endorsement a step further. So let's look at recommendations next. So recommendations, and like I said, endorsements provide a very quick visual sense of what you're valued for. That recommendation takes it further. So a recommendation is a personal testimonial that's written to illustrate the experience of working with you. So there's a handy drop-down menu in the recommendations section of your profile, which makes it extremely easy for you to reach out to very specific contacts in your network and request those recommendations. So like I said, it must be relevant, it must be strategic. So take the time to think about whom you would most value a recommendation from, and then personalize your request. So when you get into the habit of doing this about once a month, that's when it's going to work to your advantage. You can also feel free to give your recommender a little bit of direction on what it is that you might like to have that person cover. Remember our discussion on achievements versus duties? That's where you could also put this to work, right here in this section. You could give your recommender some of those achievements, and that person could refer to those in the recommendation. Because the more times that you can reinforce your skills and achievements throughout your profile, the better. Now, it might happen from time to time that you get a recommendation that you didn't solicit, or it could be that you get one that you think isn't even very good. So if you feel comfortable with it, you could always contact the recommender and ask for some revisions. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, or you just don't believe that that recommendation is appropriate for your profile, you can just simply hide it from view. So before we move on, let's take a look at a pretty good recommendation. So here's one for a student, and you can see what this person had to say about him. I think it's a very, very strong recommendation. I also want to point out that we talked about ask for a recommendation. You can see that up on the top right. That's where you could go in and click on that, and you could seek a recommendation from someone in your network. Also, when you come to that profile, you could recommend that person. So you could certainly do that. And then on the left-hand side, you will see how many recommendations this person has received versus how many recommendations this person has given. So now that we have fleshed out a really solid, a really good LinkedIn profile, what do we do now? Well, we need to network. So let's talk about networking now. So it's one thing to have a great profile, an interactive profile, and a very healthy network of connections. But it's far better to have an active role in that network of connections. So appearing in your connections LinkedIn feeds is a great way that adds value for them. And it's a great way for you to raise the value of your LinkedIn profile. So sharing relevant content with your network is one of the most accessible ways of doing this. So how do we do that? Well, start out by keeping a close eye on your own LinkedIn feed. Then you can share that content that you find genuinely interesting and that perhaps aligns with your point of view. You might even take it a step further and you could add comments to your shares. So remember when we talked about the importance of the interest section earlier? Here's why this is so important. All of those companies or organizations that post content to your LinkedIn feed provide you with opportunities to then share that with your own LinkedIn network. It will give you greater prominence within the feed. It gives you a chance to express why you think that particular piece of content matters. It's also likely to draw additional comments, which will again raise your profile across LinkedIn. Just be careful though that with the comments that you're making, that it's something that you're happy with people to associate with you. We've talked a lot about publications as well. This is another great opportunity for you to share a publication in your newsfeed for LinkedIn. And then one last thing is to join groups in LinkedIn. So there are hundreds of groups that you can join. So a great place to get started with that would be to search for university alumni groups. That's a wonderful place to start, and it's a good way to grow your network. So again, I would like you to set aside a few minutes a day to network. See if you can carve out 15 minutes, maybe while you're having lunch, that you can work on your LinkedIn network. But while it is so important in today's world to have this connection, don't be afraid to step away from your computer, your tablet, or your phone. And like I said, this makes networking easier than ever, but nothing will ever take away from that personal interaction. And that doesn't mean we have to see people in person right now, but it could be a phone call. You could stop and write somebody a handwritten note and drop it in the mail. And when we can attend live events again, certainly do that. So now we're to the section where we will address some questions. So I want you to know that we have those websites listed on there, and also my LinkedIn URL is on there. So you can feel free to reach out and connect with me, let me know that you attended this webinar. And if you would like personalized help with your profile, let me know. I offer that as a service, and I would be delighted to explain and discuss that with you. But that was a lot to cover today, and I hope that we have some questions. So sorry, do we have some questions today?
Yes, we do have a few questions. So the first question is going to be, are there other sources to help with developing a LinkedIn account?
There are lots of sources to develop your LinkedIn account. And so many, if you're associated with a university, perhaps a student or a faculty or staff member, I know at Texas State, we all have access to something called LinkedIn Learning. So it's just a click of a button on your LinkedIn account, and you can go and look at various webinars and presentations like this. And there are a good number of them that address building out a well-rounded LinkedIn profile. So if you have access to LinkedIn Learning, I would highly recommend that.
Okay, thank you. Another question is LinkedIn used in other countries?
Yes, it is. In fact, it is international. So it is used in many countries. We don't all have to be living in the same place to use it. It's very similar to any other social media platform. So yes, it's a world thing.
Okay, another question from a participant is LinkedIn used to find entry-level jobs or just for experienced job seekers?
I think it's both. So many times students that I work with are seeking that entry-level job. And so we can tailor their LinkedIn profile for that type of position. You can also be a well-seasoned professional and use that to look for your next position as well. So it basically covers both of those. But I would just tell you, like we talked about in the webinar today, to make your profile reflective of the position that you want. If you are in the job market, you'll want to skew it that direction.
Okay, and our last question in English is going to be, is it important to repost material from other sites?
Very important. You definitely want to do that because that raises your profile across the LinkedIn network. And so that's why that interest section is so important, because they're constantly sharing content, and you can go through and then reshare that with your network. And I would recommend in that 15 minutes that you're working on networking every day, that you do that at least once.
All right, and then we have a Spanish question, so I'm gonna go ahead and say it in Spanish, and then I'll go ahead and translate it into English.
Okay.
So the question in Spanish is, si soy más competente en español que en inglés, ¿puedo publicar en español? ¿Se puede traducir un perfil de LinkedIn? And then the question in English is, if I'm more proficient in Spanish, is it okay for me to publish things in Spanish? Also, can you translate LinkedIn profiles?
That's a great question. So I had somebody ask me that question before, and I didn't really know the answer, but I looked it up. And so yes, it is possible to translate a LinkedIn profile. And I would say that if you are more proficient in Spanish and that is appropriate for your audience, then that's just fine. And LinkedIn does have the ability to, for somebody in a different country that perhaps speaks a different language, it will translate your profile into the language for that person. So that's a great feature that LinkedIn has. So is it translatable? Yes, it very much is. And I would just say, know your audience. And if Spanish is appropriate for your audience, then by all means, that's perfect.
All right. Si su español es más mejor que su inglés, sí puede publicar en español, pero una cosa que tiene que tomar en cuenta es su audiencia. Si sus conexiones y empleadores solo saben inglés, trate de escribir y publicar contenido que también sea en inglés. La respuesta para la segunda pregunta de si se puede traducir un perfil de LinkedIn, sí se puede traducir, nomás depende de en qué país estás.
Thank you for that, Rocio. Were you going to want to go ahead and go over, like share your screen and go through the LinkedIn page?
If we have time, I'm happy to do that. If not, we can, if people are interested, they can contact me directly. Whatever we have.
Well, somebody asked a question if we could go over an account. So
okay, let's do that.
Yeah.
So am I going to be able to share my screen?
Yes, you should be able to share it.
All right. So can you see my screen now? Let's see if I can get.
Yes, I can see that.
Okay, we just have to pull up the LinkedIn account. Here we go. All right, so we're clicked on LinkedIn. And here we are. So of course, this is mine. And I'm going to move this down a little bit. And before we get off of mine, just so it's easy for you to see, I wanted to show you if we click around where you can do all those different things that we talked about. So up here in the Me little icon, which is what we talked about, if you click on that, and then we come down to View Profile, here's where we're able to do editing and to make changes and all those kinds of things. So if you see the little pencil icon anywhere here, you're able to edit those particular sections. So we talked about creating your own URL. And here that is right there. If you clicked on that and then you come to the little pencil, I have the opportunity to change and to create my own customized URL. So that's really important. And we can edit the content. Let's go back to that. All right, and so we talked about in another language. So here's the button where you would click on that for another language. And then I wanted to show you one other thing. So if you were down here in this experience section and you click on the edit pencil and you come down to the bottom, so if you wanted to upload documents like we talked about, photographs, videos, presentation decks, anything like that, this is where you could add the link, or this is where you could upload the document, and you would simply press the Save button. So that's important. It's also important just to know about your settings so that you make sure you are letting people see what you want them to see. So that gives you just a kind of a quick glimpse of those different sections. So now let's go to Dr. Menefee's. All right, and while I don't have access to edit or do anything like that, we can just go through it and we can take some quick thoughts about what we might be able to do to improve this. So again, she has the plain background photo that comes with LinkedIn. So certainly that is one thing that might be able to be improved. So since Dr. Menefee is the director of the Service Learning Program at Texas State University, it certainly might be appropriate for her to have a photograph of some students doing a community project to benefit an organization in town. That might be an appropriate photograph. Again, we talked about her profile photo. That probably just needs to be her, not her and her spouse. And it looks like that's an outdoor location, which might be okay if the photo could be made large enough where about 60% of that frame at least is a picture of Dr. Menefee. So you can see she has a lot of contacts, and if we wanted to look at who she was connected to, we could click on that and we could see all of the connections that Dr. Menefee has. Here's something that's interesting, that she's celebrating 32 years at Texas State. So we could click on this here and we could tell her congratulations. If we wanted to send Dr. Menefee a message, here's that messaging icon right here where we could click on that. Another great way that you might be able to grow your network, this is important. So there are 42 people that I know and Dr. Menefee knows. So that's a mutual connection. So if I went up and looked at all 500 plus of hers, there might be some other people that I could add to my network as well. Here is her experience section. So on the experience section, there's some great information in there, but remember we talked about skills and accomplishments. So we could work on, could any of those be changed to be an accomplishment or a skill? I think also the fact that this looks almost like a paragraph could be changed to put it into bullet points. Bullet points just make it a little bit easier for your reader. And then certainly she could also add the website for Texas State University or the website for the Service Learning Program. As she was on this foundation, she might have some link to a website that they have, or maybe a video that they might have put together. Same thing on education. It would be great to be able to use a link there that we could learn more about the University of South Carolina. I would certainly recommend, especially for students or people who might have just graduated, to think about including anything underneath your education. So maybe you were on the dean's list, you could include that there. Maybe you took some specialized classes, or you took a certain concentration in a degree plan, you could put that in there. If you had any other types of awards, or maybe you were in a student organization that competed and won a competition, that's something that you could include in there as well. So here's where we can look at the endorsements for Dr. Menefee. So you see these are all very relevant: leadership, entrepreneurship, and management. But let's think if we wanted to see more of what those are that she has. So we can see all of the different things that Dr. Menefee has been endorsed for. And if we wanted to, we could click on one of these and we could say that she was highly skilled at strategic planning. And we could endorse her for that. And we would submit. That's how easy it is to endorse someone for something. Very, very simple. And then let's move down. So now we can actually see the difference between that very quick click of a button to endorse somebody, and then we have a well-developed recommendation. So Dr. Menefee has given 5, but only received 1. So this is an area where she might be able to grow that network of recommendations. So again, we talked about if she was going to ask for a recommendation, it's that simple. You click on it, she would pick that relationship, and she would be able to ask for that recommendation. If I wanted to recommend her, I could do that there. So they make it very intuitive and very easy to be able to do these things. Then down at the bottom, again, all of the interests that she has. Of course, she's following her alma mater, the common experience. But if we click on this, we get to see that there's some other things that she's following as well. So all of these things are important. I would suggest that perhaps one of the opportunities that Dr. Menefee has is to add some more of those interactive components to her profile, and that's just going to keep people on that profile for much longer. So that kind of takes us through a few of the things that we've talked about, so you actually see them on a profile. So before we end today, sorry, are there any other questions?
There's no other questions. Yeah, that was it.
All right.
Okay.
This has been fun. Thank you.
Yes. Let me go ahead and share again so that I can show the QR code. Okay. Thank you to everybody for attending our webinar for today. Thank you to Kent, Rocio, and Sachet for helping put this webinar together. And the recording for this webinar and all of our previous webinars will be available through our WordPress site. In regard to the QR code, if you could please scan it with your phone, and it will take you to the post survey that you can complete to get credit for having viewed this webinar. And again, thank you everybody for your time, and have a great day.